Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to share about my experience and my journey with breastfeeding. I have a 7.5-month-old daughter. Her name is Nalia. Breastfeeding is something that I thought would come so naturally and so effortlessly and be such a beautiful experience, and hopefully it is that for everybody. But from what I've learned just going through this myself is that so many women struggle with breastfeeding, and I don't think it's something that is really talked about. I felt so bad and so alone. I want to make this video for anyone who is going through something similar or who has had, any other challenges in motherhood. I'm already getting emotional, but just becoming a new mom is so much. Yeah, I just really want to share my journey and my experience. Maybe it will help somebody, or maybe some of you can relate to this if you also didn't have that vision and that perfect scenario of what you thought something might be. Pregnancy was really great. I didn't have any complications and I felt really amazing pretty much throughout my whole pregnancy, and birth was really great, labor, obviously painful but manageable, and I felt like I had a really great positive experience. But yeah, breastfeeding, that was really my big challenge throughout this whole new chapter, and I want to talk about that too. I want you guys to have a full picture, and it's taken me a good few months to just let everything settle and kind of heal and recuperate from the whole experience and just be at peace with everything that happened and how it didn't really go as I had hoped for. But we're in a really good place right now, and I want to share my story, my experience, and also just preparing for this video. I went through all my notes that I took from all the weeks. So in my notes app on my phone, I keep little notes from each week. Now I do it each month, where I noted down little things that were going on that week. I also looked through lots of our photos from that time, and I realized how many things I have pushed and kind of stored in parts of my brain that I haven't opened. Because when something is very difficult, I don't know if you guys are like this too, but I tend to kind of put them away in my brain so that I don't think about them, because some of the things were really difficult. I'm going to take you guys through in a timeline way from when she was born up until this point. So my baby girl Nalia, she was born on her due date. She weighed 2.9 kilos. I will put up what that is in pounds. She always measured a little bit smaller throughout my pregnancy, but nothing that was abnormal, just on the typical range of how heavy a baby is when they're born. She was a little bit on the lighter side, but still completely healthy and happy, and everything was fine. So after giving birth, when I was ready to be rolled into my room, the nurse told me to roll over on my side, lay the baby next to me so she could latch on and start breastfeeding. And this was as they were rolling me into my room, and it was very late at this point. I had been in labor since the night before. So the night before I had gotten probably 3 hours of sleep, and the night before that I was having early contractions. Not full on labor, but I couldn't sleep throughout most of that night. So I was extremely tired that night, and then of course I had just gone through almost 20 hours of labor. I had given birth and I was exhausted. So when we got to the hospital room, it was after midnight. They wanted Mo to leave. He wasn't allowed to stay overnight. So I was in my room by myself with this new baby and just trying to figure out am I doing it properly, taking in everything that had happened with labor and with birth, and you feel completely sore. I had really wished that there was a nurse that would have come in and helped me and just guided me and told me if I was doing it right and when I should switch sides. And I had been calling for assistance for a nurse to come in, but apparently they were super busy, they were understaffed, they were doing construction, which was a whole other thing. And there was one nurse who came in, but she only wanted to take the baby to clean her, and then she would give her back to me. But I was no, I don't want to give away my baby. I just met her. I need to figure out if I'm doing this correctly. We did speak to the clinic afterwards and told them what had happened. That definitely shouldn't happen for a first-time mom especially. Anyway, that night she was pretty much on me the whole night. I think I got maybe like an hour of sleep in total, and I was so exhausted. I want to note that because I think that really affected my breast milk production. Just from being so sleep deprived, that is not good for your body, and your body needs that rest as well in order to function and to produce. The next day, that evening, Nelia was really fussy. I was feeding her over and over and she just wasn't settling, and I was asking the nurses like, what's the matter? Also, as a first-time parent, like, you are so concerned with every single thing about your baby. They're so little and fragile, and every single thing they're doing, like how they're breathing. She was also crying when we were breastfeeding, so I was really concerned. And normally skin to skin and breastfeeding, that calms the baby, but in that moment she was like hysterical. So one of the nurses took the baby into the like doctor, how do you say, like checkup kind of area where they do different tests, and it's just for the doctors and nurses. They took her to do a checkup, and she came back probably like 20 or 30 minutes later, a completely different baby. She was so calm. The nurse said to me, she was just hungry. That is such a standout moment of my experience. Firstly, it was super upsetting that I hadn't gotten that one-on-one time with a nurse or a lactation consultant. I'd been trying the whole day to get a nurse to help and to assist and just to see if everything was fine. Again, we did speak to them later, but that's definitely not something that should happen. And then when I actually did get somebody, they basically took the baby and fed her formula in this room instead of actually, you know, really checking if we were breastfeeding properly. Yeah, I called Mo. I was crying and I was saying like, oh my God, she was hungry. Like, that's why she was crying so much and being so hysterical. And Mo at that point, like that, it like did something in his brain too, where he was like, Annie's milk is not enough. And from that moment on, I felt like a failure, and I felt like the worst mom alive. It just opened this path in my brain that I never thought was even a thing. Most of the breastfeeding stories and experiences that I've heard about and that I know just in my personal life, with my own family, with friends and people online, has been positive. I've never heard of somebody struggling from that very beginning moment. I just didn't know anything about it, and I felt horrible. So in the first few days, you have what's called colostrum, which is this golden, really rich, like super nutrient dense milk. So it's not really milk, but it's what a newborn needs the first few days of life. And the actual milk, the one that is creamy and white, that comes in a few days later. I think because she was born a little bit on the smaller side, it almost feels like she came out and wanted to really gain weight, and very fast. Like, she was such a hungry baby. Afterwards, when I had spoken to a proper lactation consultant in my clinic room the day after this has happened, she told me that that is common with babies who are born a little bit on the smaller side, that they really want to eat. It just felt like my body wasn't ready and just couldn't keep up with the demands that she was asking for. And yeah, that's why the nurse also ended up giving her formula. The problem with that though is that the formula is a lot denser and more calorie rich, and they don't have to work as hard to get it through the bottle, and they can quickly start to love and prefer that over the boob and the breast milk. And I remember there was this kind of like divide with the nurses in the clinic room. So I would really wanted to breastfeed her, but the night after that had happened, again, she was really fussy. She wasn't settling. Mo also said, just give her formula, just ask for more formula. And I didn't want to do that. I knew that it was about supply and demand. Like, she had to be on my breast in order to stimulate that production. And the more formula and the more bottles I gave her, the less my body was getting signaled to produce breast milk. But at the same time, of course, I didn't want to see her crying and be so upset for such a long period of time. So I had to ask the nurses for more formula, and they were giving me like bad energy. Like, why are you feeding your newborn formula? Like, I didn't even want to do that. It was definitely like a divide within the nurses on the ones who were pro giving formula and the ones who absolutely were not. Yeah, it was just really difficult, and I felt horrible every single time I had to give her formula, and then I was still trying to breastfeed her. But at the same time, I was really hopeful and really optimistic that I would get the hang of it and that we would be exclusively breastfeeding in a few days. Also, I do want to mention the soreness of the nipples after breastfeeding for the first few days. I think it was my left one that ended up hurting so bad that I would literally cry when she was breastfeeding because it was so painful. It got to the point where I just couldn't have her latched on me because it was so painful. So one of the nurses gave me a pump from the clinic that I would then pump on the side, and I would breastfeed her from this side, and then I would give her the pumped milk in a bottle. So I came home about 3 to 4 days after being at the clinic, and it was really tough being at home. Like, again, I had not slept for days. My body was completely exhausted, you know, still healing from birth and from getting stitches. You obviously have a very heavy period after you give birth, and just adjusting to new life. The first few days we breastfed during the day, and at night she would have some formula before her like nighttime sleep. It just killed me every single time we had to do that because I just felt like this isn't normal. I really wanted to exclusively breastfeed her, but seeing her really upset and not being able to settle, that worried both me and Mo. And Mo was very much like, just give her the formula, it's fine. By approximately the second week, she needed a bottle almost after every time we breastfed. I would give her both sides for a good amount of time, and then she would just start crying, and she would be crying as she's still breastfeeding. That is just so heartbreaking because you obviously feel like she's not fully satisfied. At week 3, I had my midwife who I'd been working with throughout my pregnancy. She's also a lactation consultant. She came over to our home to do a checkup on me, my stitches, the health of the baby. She took her weight, and of course we also talked about breastfeeding. I told her, and she could see that I was having such a difficult time, and that it was like physically difficult but also very, very emotionally difficult. I showed her how I was feeding Nalia and how after a few minutes she would just start crying. I was crying, and I think I spent pretty much that whole session in tears, pretty much just having a complete breakdown. And she told me that I need to rest and that I am so extremely sleep deprived and my body is just not functioning. She talked to Mo and told him that he really needs to be more involved, and suggested that I completely stop breastfeeding her like one-on-one, and that I start pumping and put that pumped breast milk in a bottle for Mo to give to the baby, because she saw how just emotionally difficult it was for me having Nalia on me, and of course like just crying. Like, that is such a horrible feeling, and just that alone can really affect your breast milk and just the way that your body functions. So I then went exclusively to pumping, and I stopped breastfeeding her like skin to skin, and Mo started doing the first feeding of the day and the last feeding of the day, and then during the day I would pump and give her that milk. Also, my midwife said that Nalia has colic, and she probably has colic because she was getting so much formula as well. On another note, her weight was increasing really, really fast, almost to the point where she was concerned. She said that it's not normal for babies to gain so much weight at such a quick pace. I think Nalia was just such a hungry baby. Anyway, so our midwife also said we need to monitor how much formula and just milk overall that she's getting. So I think the limit at that point was 80 mils per feeding. So that was like another thing that all of a sudden we had to pay attention to, make sure that we're not overfeeding her, which I didn't even know was a thing that you could do with newborns, is like overfeed them. Anyway, and she said that this could also be adding to her colic and her digestive discomfort. Her having colic was super difficult. She spent so many evenings just crying and crying for hours and hours and hours. It was not because she was tired or hungry or a diaper or anything like that. It was just this extreme pain and discomfort that a lot of newborns experience in the first few weeks of life. I think it peaks at around 6 to 8 weeks, and then it gets better. For those next few days, I felt a lot better because I didn't have that emotional stress of feeding her. Every time we started breastfeeding, my heart would start racing. I would get super anxious. I would start sweating. I just knew that disappointment was gonna come, and it was just a horrible feeling. So when I was pumping, I was still getting that expressing of milk and that stimulation as well for my body to produce more milk, but there weren't any like sad emotions connected to it because it was a pump, it wasn't a baby. And the pump was also great because it gave me like a solid 20 minutes on both breasts to express milk, whereas Nalia, she would only be on them for a few minutes. So the pump just allowed more stimulation and more than production of breast milk. A few days after that, the colic really started to kick in. And as a breastfeeding mom, especially for the first time, I was really worried about the things that I was eating and it maybe affecting her and giving her digestive discomfort. Like, there are certain foods that can really be aggravating for a newborn's stomach when you're breastfeeding. Things like caffeine or dairy, even certain vegetables that can make you gassy can make the baby gassy. Then of course spicy foods and things like that that can then go into the breast milk. So I'd been taking a variety of supplements that had actually been working really well in promoting breast milk production. One of those things was fenugreek, and I actually found that that worked really well. I felt like my supply really went up when I had that. But I did read that that can be very irritating for some babies. I then somehow convinced myself that my breast milk was the issue, and that was why she was having really bad colic and really bad discomfort, and my breast milk was the problem. So what I did, which I now I cannot believe I did that, but I would pump and I would throw it away. Just the whole process of even just getting that milk, like I was pumping around the clock every 3 hours. I would give myself a little bit of a longer stretch at night, but during the day was every 2 to 3 hours. And looking back, I know that it wasn't this fenugreek and it wasn't my breast milk, because she was then just on formula for that time, and she had some really bad outbreaks of colic during that time, which had nothing to do with her having my breast milk. And even now, looking back, thinking that my breast milk gave her colic, my breast milk is obviously made perfectly for her and for her stage of development and for what she needs. But at the time, I don't know, I just felt so bad. I felt like the worst mother, not being able to provide enough for my daughter, and then what I could provide, I thought that was making her sick. And it was such a horrible time. Anyway, we kept going, and I was starting to feel a little bit better at this point, because now Mo was doing the first feeding in the morning and the last one at night, so I could go to bed a little bit earlier and wake up a little bit later, maybe a combined hour more of sleep, which really felt like golden at the time. That 1 hour was incredible. So my body was slowly starting to kind of put itself back together and recuperate just from labor and birth and the first few weeks of not sleeping. It was actually nice to be pumping and getting my milk that way, and just having a little bit of space between the emotional connection with the baby crying on my breast, but still being able to give her my breast milk. Okay, then at week 5, Mo's mom came to visit us. She was super encouraging for me to breastfeed. I'm so happy for that, and she was really a light and very encouraging and just very positive and optimistic that I could do this. I was pumping around the clock. She was staying here with us, and she saw me pumping all the time, and she said, why don't you just put the baby on your breast and just give it to her directly? And I told her everything that we had been through, and that it was super difficult, and just emotionally I couldn't handle it. I was very stressed, and this way it allowed me to still get breast milk, but yeah, not have to feel those really sad emotions. She was here for maybe 10 days or so, and for the last 3 or 4 days that she was here, I started breastfeeding Nalia again, skin to skin. And it did feel absolutely amazing. My supply had definitely increased by that point, because I had been so consistent with the pump and with just giving those signals to my brain hey, we need to make more milk. And she did have a few feeds where she was completely satisfied on just breast milk. That felt really nice. Also, I think it's important to note that when you are combined feeding, or you're really just trying to get onto breast milk, I don't know if all babies are like this, but for Nalia, she really enjoyed just the fast pacedness of the formula. It doesn't take anything to stimulate the flow, because when you're breastfeeding, there's a few seconds, maybe 10 seconds or so, where they're just kind of sucking at the nipple, but there's no milk actually coming. It's just kind of warming up the production or the flow. But of course, with a bottle, bottle, you just put it in their mouth and the milk just comes. There's more work and more effort involved with breastfeeding than with formula. So at the end of the day, when she was really tired and just fussy and more hungry, especially when she was cluster feeding at night, which a lot of babies tend to do, like kind of preparing themselves for the longer stretch of not feeding overnight, she was hungry and she really enjoyed just the bottle. Like she wasn't always patient enough to be breastfeeding. Then we got to the point again where she wasn't on the breast for long enough to actually get all the milk out, because I remember like hand expressing milk when she was done with a side and there was still milk left, but she, at that point, after she had been on the breast for a while, she just preferred to take the bottle. So then I had to pump afterwards to get the rest of the milk out. So at that point I was then breastfeeding, I was giving her bottle, I was then pumping, and when I was giving her a bottle, I was first giving her a bottle with breast milk, and then I would make another bottle with formula. You can actually mix them, but she wouldn't always finish the entire bottle. And of course, you want to make sure that they're first having the breast milk that you worked so hard to get out and that you don't have so much of. You don't want to dilute it with the formula and then have to throw it away. So I would breastfeed her, give her a bottle with breast milk, give her a bottle with formula, and then I would pump. That was so hard because it all takes so much time. And when they're such little babies, their wake windows are so short. So just by the time where she had eaten and had all the bottles, it was basically time for her to sleep again. And in the very beginning, she was only sleeping on me, like contact naps. She did not have any naps by herself during the day. At night, she was a really great night sleeper. We would co-sleep, but she would sleep in her own bed, like next to our bed, and that was amazing. But during the day, she would only nap if she was being held, which then made it so difficult and often impossible for me to pump because I needed this part of my body free. It definitely made me feel really trapped by time and by the things. I felt like I couldn't enjoy as much as I wanted to, like being with her and just having that like one-on-one time with her, that kind of playtime with her. Was very much like onto the next thing. Like I have to make sure that I pump, because every time she eats, I basically need to pump to then tell my body like, hey, we need to make more milk, or we need to get the rest of the milk out, so that my body knows that we need to make more milk. Probably a week after that, I met with another lactation consultant. I really just wanted to make sure, like, am I doing this right? I wanted a second opinion and just more knowledge on like how we can make this work, because I really wanted to just exclusively breastfeed her. And just as a side note, like I would have loved to breastfeed her for years, for as long as she wanted. I saw myself like breastfeeding on the go, like out and about in the car, at restaurants. I imagined us like co-sleeping in bed, breastfeeding. And for me, the thought of formula was so difficult. It's not something that I ever imagined that we would need to do. And secondly, just like the logistics of everything really stressed me out. Like the bottles, the washing, the sanitizing, obviously having to buy the formula and then make the bottles, and the water, like the water temperature, and what were we going to do when we travel? Like you have to bring all this equipment and all these things, and it just really stressed me out. I wanted to do everything possible for us to be able to exclusively breastfeed. So she came over, we had such a long talk, and we worked together for a few weeks, and she really did give me a lot of good encouragement. That was something that I really needed at that time as well, just like that support person that I could text, you know, give me little pieces of advice when I needed them, like in the moment. Whereas at home with Mo, like he obviously sees it from a different perspective. Like he just wants Nalia to be fed. Like yes, that is so valid and so correct, but at the time, me being in that place, like I thought that that was the best thing that I could do, is give her my breast milk. With breast milk, it adapts as the baby grows, and if the baby is sick, your body then adapts the breast milk to exactly what they need. And there's just so many things like are special about breast milk, but there's so many incredible things about formula as well, which I'm gonna get to. At the time, I was really just like very narrow-sighted on this is what we're gonna do, and I really tried my everything. So yeah, the lactation consultant, she gave me a lot of good encouragement. Of course, she gave me like tips, and she saw how Nalia was feeding. Kind of went back to just breastfeeding during the day with an occasional bottle of formula at night, or just to kind of like top up for what she needed. But we all saw that it still just wasn't enough for what she was craving and wanting. Sometimes I would be feeding her and I would be walking around like bouncing with her, and that's the only way that she would continue to get the milk out of the breast, because she was used to that bottle, it just flowing out and not having to put a lot of, you know, work to get there. And as a small baby, like, your main priority is conserving energy, and you're in this kind of survival mode. And for her, that was like the smartest thing to, you know, be able to get milk without having to put a lot of effort in it. But if I was walking around bouncing her and like moving like this, like with her on my poop, she would have more patience to eat and to finish up more of the milk in the breast. So yeah, with all of this, I was breastfeeding her every 2 to 3 hours. I was then giving her the bottles, again, breast milk, then formula. Then I would sit at the pump for 20 minutes. And this was like around the clock. And with all this, still trying to like do other things, take care of myself, take care of my home, like work a little bit. It was a lot. I would also do power pumping sessions, which is like an intense form of pumping breast milk, where you pretty much sit for about an hour at the pump. You simulate cluster feeding. So you pump on and off for an hour total, and it's a lot on your body, it's a lot on your breast. That did help to increase my supply, but it's such a demanding and difficult thing on your body. Also, again, if you just don't have the time, like with Nalia, she was not napping by herself, and when she wasn't napping, she was eating. So there wasn't a lot of time. And during this time, like over the next few weeks, my supply didn't drop, but it didn't increase. So we were kind of like staying on the same level. As much as I had, I would give her, and then I would supplement with formula to kind of top up the difference. And I was pretty fine with this, like emotionally speaking at this point. I had talked so much to my mom about this, and my mom kept telling me, reassuring me, like, Annie, it's okay. As long as she's fed, that's the most important thing. And looking back, I wish I could have just like taken myself and like shaken myself and said, everything is going to be all right. I was so stressed out. I felt so terrible. I felt like the worst mother, just horrible. Like, I could not do this for my child. I remember also reading a lot of success stories with formula feeding. I would read in these like threads online and stuff like that. There wasn't that much information on YouTube, but I just wanted to connect with another mom who had been through something similar. And that's also why I'm making this video, even if it's just one person who gets it and who is going through something similar, or who can relate to this in any way. As a new mom, you're in such a fragile state. Like, your whole life has changed completely. You know, you're filled with so much love and joy, and you're just in awe of your baby and of your body. But at the same time, it's so much to digest. Like, there's so many big emotions from every place. I think it's so important to really support moms during that very, very fragile and sensitive time, especially for first-time moms, because it's like you're being thrown out in the ocean and just like expecting to swim. So at month 3, I broke my finger. Truly such a devastating time. I was just starting to feel a little bit better, like kind of more back to myself. I had just started working out again. We had gotten into a better routine. I was feeling better with, you know, all the feeding and all of that. And then I broke my finger, which is just crazy. I did need anesthesia. Like, I had a local anesthesia in my hand when it first broke, because it was so painful. And then I needed surgery about a week later, where they did another local anesthesia on my hand. So during that time, I also couldn't breastfeed Nalia, because the anesthesia would go in my body and it could get to her. So I was again then pumping and throwing my milk away, which is like the worst thing ever. For those couple of weeks, we were just giving her formula, and then something happened where she just started refusing the bottle, and the only thing that would actually calm her was breastfeeding, which then completely switched like the whole thing. So then I would be breastfeeding her, but at this point my supply was decreasing so quickly. Definitely the stress of breaking my finger, probably like all the medicines that I needed to be taking, the surgery, and all of that was really affecting my supply. And I don't know if Nalia felt that. Maybe she felt like she wanted to get the last bits of what was actually there, and that last like bonding, you know, moment with me. I really don't know. It's like a phenomenon to think about it, but she was basically refusing the bottle until she had the breast first. Also, before this point, we could have different people feed her, like she would be completely happy and open, but after I broke my finger and my supply started going down, she did not accept the bottle from anyone except me. It's kind of nice as well, like your baby just wants to be fed from you, but also it made things a little inconvenient because, you know, Mo couldn't be there and feed her and do his like daddy things with her, which included feeding her sometimes, so that I could do other things. But I also felt in myself that I knew that these moments were going to come to an end with breastfeeding, so I really embraced it, and I had her on me for as long as she wanted, for as much as she wanted, for every feeding. And throughout this time I was still pumping as well, so I think that's important to know. I was back to breastfeeding her, bottle feeding her, formula feeding, first breast milk, then formula, then pumping again. By month 4, so after a month of doing this, I would be sitting at the pump for 20 minutes and I would get like a few drops of breast milk. Looking back, like I did that for a good couple of weeks where I would literally get like drops after 20 minutes. It's like crazy that I was even still doing it, but I was like holding on to like the very last bits that I could get. But I know that my body had been through so much. Definitely, you know, really sad to see that, of course, but I also had a lot of, you know, sympathy and grace from my body, what it had been through. I had just broken my finger, I had this surgery. That was definitely hard, but at the same time, I started having this like growing sense of relief of a future where I wouldn't be attached to the pump, and a future where I had more time to actually be with her and enjoy her and us having more time to play and to interact, and just not having this huge mental load of like, I need to pump, I need to produce. Let's say by like middle of month 4 is when we completely stopped, and she's been on formula since. Even with formula alone, we did go through some difficulties on which one is the best to feed her. She had some sensitivities to some where she threw up a lot, and we thought maybe she had like an allergy to something in the formula, so we played around with different types and brands and things like that. But we are now happy with the one that we have, which is the HIP organic. I know that formulas are like local based on your country, so this is the one that we have here in Germany that works the best for her. Words are not enough to describe how incredible formula is. For me, I really look at it as a miracle food, a food from God. Having this incredible second option on how to feed your baby is everything. As much as I had wanted and dreamed of this incredible breastfeeding experience, we did the best that we could, and she got the most out of me that she could, like literally every single last drop. And I am so grateful for that, and I wish that I could have given myself a bit more grace and kindness and just acceptance during that time, because it was so difficult. I'm so grateful for like the support that I had at that time, like especially from my mom. My mom is definitely very pro breastfeeding as well. Like she breastfed me until I was 8 months old, but she said other kids that she's just formula fed, and she told me from day one that it does not matter how you feed your baby, just make sure you feed your baby and she's happy and it's all good. Nalia is such a happy and healthy baby. She is hitting all of her milestones. She's a super curious baby. She's really engaging. We have so much fun together. We have such a special bond, and none of that has to come just from breastfeeding your baby. When it comes to some of the logistical things that I was worried about when it came to formula feeding, all of that is sorted and taken care of. You know, you get used to everything, you find your ways, and we're managing really well. So we've got our bottles. We use the MEM anti-colic bottles, which are great. Then we have our baby Brezza, which makes the formula directly. So you just press a button, the water's already warm. It's kind of like a coffee machine. It's great. We have a sterilizer as well, but recently I'm just putting all of the bottles in the dishwasher, and I run the sterilization cycle, so it just cleans and sterilizes all at once. Yeah, when we're out and about on the go, I take the formula in these little to-go little containers. So when it comes time to making a bottle, you just empty one out and you can make it really quick. You don't have to measure anything, and you just make it work. Who knows how it will be be with the second time around, like with our next baby. I'm definitely going to keep an open mind and not put so much pressure and expectations on myself. Of course, I will do my best to breastfeed them as much as possible. The main thing I've really learned is it's so important to take care of not just your baby, but also of yourself, of your mental health. As moms, we want to do the best that we know and that we can for our baby. That doesn't always look the same for every person and for every family. So also just being kind and respectful to other moms. Like, you never know what another mom is going through. You know, if you have friends or family members or anyone who's, you know, just given birth, like, be gentle with the moms. And some people just don't want to breastfeed at all for completely different reasons, even if they could breastfeed, and that's okay too. I hope that this video was helpful. I hope that if you're going through anything similar, please know that you're not alone. Nally and I are so happy now. We are healthy. She's developing and progressing beautifully. I'm really happy. I feel like such a weight has been lifted off of my shoulders, and I'm still very positive for the future, and who knows how it will be with baby number 2. Keeping an open mind and an open heart, of course. I know that in the very beginning stages of having a new baby, like, the topic of food and sleep are so important. They're so huge, and that's all you can kind of think about in the newborn stage. But know that it does get better. There are so many other incredible, beautiful things to look forward to. So many other ways that you'll be able to bond and connect with your child. So many good things are coming, and you being a mom, don't base that on your ability or inability to breastfeed. There are so many other important factors that play into being a good mom and being there for your child, and feeding is just such a small part of that. So I really hope that you guys found this video helpful. It means a lot for me to be able to share this story with you. It was a huge thing in my life. It does get me very emotional. I'm totally at peace with it now, but you know, looking back at my notes and the pictures and everything from that time, like, it was difficult. We are better now. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one. Mwah. Bye guys.